Welcome to the Every Breath Counts podcast. My name is Ryan Shekel, and each week I interview experts and leaders about their stories and strategies on how to optimize your mind, your body, your career, and your life so that you can make every breath count. Thank you for investing your time in the show and yourself. Now let's get started. Oprah said, breathe, let go, and remind yourself that this very moment is the only one you know you have for sure. And Thich Nhat Hanh said, breath is the bridge which connects life to consciousness, which unites your body to your thoughts. Barbara Tanze was a world-class opera singer that went on a journey to find the most efficient way to breathe, to stay at the pinnacle of her profession. After studying the art of breathing, she started a company, Voice Up, to help others optimize their breathing to improve performance in singing, athletics, speaking, and all-around health and wellness. In this episode, Barbara shares the importance of nasal breathing, why we need to breathe less, and how breathing properly can greatly improve your health. If you know anyone that struggles with snoring or mouth breathing, they need to hear this episode. Copy the link wherever you're listening and text it to them. Or tag them on social media, and be sure to tag me at Every Breath Counts podcast as well. If this is your first time here, welcome and thank you for tuning in. Be sure to click the subscribe button to stay up to date with all the latest episodes, and be sure to rate us and leave a review on Apple Podcasts with the most impactful part of this episode when you're done listening. Get ready to optimize your health and learn to breathe properly with Barbara Tanze. Barbara, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I am so excited about this discussion. So for any listener that's new to the podcast, I named the podcast the Every Breath Counts podcast because I was born with a rare lung disease called cystic fibrosis, and CF, as we call it, manifests most commonly as decreased lung function. So I've kind of watched my FEV1, which is the way they monitor lung function. I've watched it fluctuate from between 30 to 70% of the average person, average male, my height, weight, age, and it's kind of done that throughout my entire life. And I've tried so many ways to optimize my breathing, but your experience is really interesting to me. And I'm looking at you as an expert because of that experience and also because of the career you've chosen because of it. So tell me about your background and how you decided to become a breathing expert.
Well, I don't know if I'm a breathing expert. Right now, I'm trying to be a breathing understander, maybe more than, other people would call people expert. I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I ask a lot of questions and I sometimes get answers. So I actually am a trained opera singer. So I have a master's degree in opera singing and vocal pedagogy. And I actually sang a lot of operas around Europe and around the world. Before 10 years ago, I started to be more interested in how I can make my voice work more efficiently, because that was just around the time I hit the 30s. And so things didn't regenerate as they did before. And so my body was just not forgiving me anymore, at least not so readily for, going over certain boundaries. And so I had to start to look into more like functional things. It wasn't just about, philosophy or especially classical singing. There is still a lot of just do that. It's very kind of, it's not very precise and not very anatomical. Yeah. So it's slowly changing, but especially at the time when I studied it. Okay. And I think I was actually still lucky with the teachers that I had. So there's a lot of myths and a lot of information that is it's imprecise in the sense that, it would be how some people feel certain things. And if I don't feel it the same way, then I would be completely lost because it wasn't based on something functional or some, anatomy or something. It was just, I feel it like this. And so you have to do it like that, like I feel it. Of course, that works
is that
sometimes, but
is that similar? Is that similar to, like, you always hear how high level athletes oftentimes aren't the best coaches because they just rely on saying like, just do it the way I did it. Like, it's great. Like, is that the kind of the same thing in opera?
Yes, same thing. You know, if you have a great singer who was naturally very well coordinated, they would just sing and they wouldn't understand why it worked out so well for them. And so then they would just describe the feeling for them, which is great. But maybe for me, that's not the same thing. Well, actually, ironically, I was actually one of those naturally quite well coordinated singers until I got older and I had 2 children. And so things, of course, changed in my body. And so it just didn't work that way anymore. And yeah, the fact that during my studies, everything came to me so naturally actually came back to haunt me, because once it didn't work so well anymore, I was a bit lost. I didn't understand.
That's a great like story to relate to anybody who relies on just natural ability to perform at their highest level. Is when things do happen, you do have to take a step back, reevaluate, be self-aware that maybe things aren't going perfectly anymore, or you're just not at the same level, or competition is just getting better. And I would imagine in opera, there's always someone coming up that has this big booming voice that can maybe hit highs and lows that you can't. And was that something where you were just like, oh man, I'm not performing at my level. How do I get back to where I was?
Well, I think, you know, when you're hitting 30 in opera, it's basically you're not at the end of your education yet. You know, you're not at the height of your career at 30.
Your natural ability took you there, and then you were like, now I have to grow.
Exactly. It took me till that step of the way. And then, I mean, I'm sure it's a very complex thing. I can't blame it on just one factor or another, but I just realized that the way I'm doing it, it's not efficient. Like I would get tired, and my voice was tired, and I was just feeling really burnt out. So I started to look for answers. And the first thing I did was to do psychotherapy, to just understand if, you know, my boundaries had been maybe set wrong, if maybe I had just accepted things because I was pressured into things. That happens, I think, both, again, to athletes and to high-level singers. You know, you get pressured into things by people who see you in a certain place, but actually that's not where you see yourself or where you would like to be or where you should be. But because people pressure you into that, and you kind of feel like, wow, that's my only possibility. That's like, wow, it's such a chance to do this, and it's so great, and I have to. And at a certain point, when you reach a certain age, you just start to question that. And especially with 2 children, I had to start questioning if it was worth me, you know, like pushing myself and going over my boundaries and being really exhausted. And at the time I never had an eating disorder or something, but I just forgot to eat. And I'm not large, but at the time I was really way too thin, and I didn't have any reserves. And of course, not good for the voice. It just all around bad. And I had to just try to find a way to set proper boundaries and understand where I was standing in this and how to find my place. And from that, I mean, that really helped me a lot. But what it didn't help me with was all of the excessive tensions and all of the physiological things and all of the anatomical, like mechanical things those habits that I had built, those, you know, compensation patterns that I had built in order to keep myself going, because I wanted to, you know, I was like, really, I wanted to prove to everybody that I can be a good mom and I can be a good singer and I can have a career and all of this. And I also do have a husband, so I just don't want to sound like I don't have one. Yeah, he's wonderful. Yeah. And without him, I wouldn't have managed. But I just had to, like, first clean up my head. And then I just felt that I needed to clean up my body. I had to understand my body. I had to become partners with my body and not just using it and abusing it, you know? And so that's how I got into breath work, or that's how I got into breathing coordination, which is a method that those of you who read Breath by James Nestor, it's a method that was initially started by a man called Carl Stau. in the US in the 1950s. And so he worked a lot with singers because he was a choral conductor. So he worked a lot with singers. And he basically found a way how to coordinate the diaphragm with the intercostal muscles, like the rib cage and the diaphragm, really a very mechanical thing. And I was lucky that I had studied with Robin de Haas, who had kind of unearthed that method that Carl Stough had started. Carl Stough had passed away in the year 2000. And so made that available for other people. So I started to train that method. And I did that for 4 years. And it's really a manual way of helping ribs to start to move, to helping a person understand how much ribs can move. By the way, I've had also one case of a child with cystic fibrosis. And really interesting. It was part of a case series that I did. And the whole rib mobility thing is just you never hear about it. But it's
true.
important.
That is
Yeah.
true. Let me. I'm getting a ton of. Do you have headphones by any chance?
Yes, I do. I think I do.
For whatever, I'm getting like a full echo sometimes of everything I say.
Okay,
so if
that
you can
is strange. I can try.
And it's not doing it now, so I don't know what it is.
Let me try to just plug them in and see what happens.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it wasn't anything that like ruined anything you said. It was just when I cut in, it gave me a full echo. Can you hear me? Is it better
like this? Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Let's stick with that then. So
good.
Okay. So you said something really interesting, and I'm curious to get your opinion on this because you talked about the stress of having kids, having a husband your entire life, and then still trying to have this career as a singer in opera. And it sounded like what you were saying was that stress kind of manifested physically for you, which really forced you to try and find out how the mechanics of breathing would allow you to perform at the level that maybe you're used to, or even take you to a new level. And that's really interesting to me because I think that a lot of people, everyday people that are going through life that may not be professional athletes, may not be opera singers, have that stress, and you see it in them. You see it in their face. You see it in their posture. So what is it about this stress? What is it about this posture, about the ribs, about the diaphragm, everything? How does stress manifest into constricted breathing?
Well, I think that stress, first of all, manifests in like a higher breathing frequency. So I think this is like a very, very basic thing. You know, when we're under stress, when we feel threatened or just feel threatened in a larger sense, right? I didn't feel physically threatened, even though maybe I did. But you know, sometimes we don't realize that we feel threatened. But the thing is that our body will start to breathe faster because it's preparing it's protecting us. It's preparing to fight. It's preparing, you know, to kind of go into hiding or to do all of those survival strategies that we have. And so this higher breathing frequency comes with a whole lot of issues. Like, for example, we would start to use muscles that are secondary breathing muscles, like the neck muscles, pectoral muscles, which means that for our intercostal, so for the rib cage will not move as flexibly where, you know, all of the ribs are moving almost individually, but it's going to start to move like one structure, right? So the intercostal muscles are just going to stop they're not going to be as flexible because I'm going to start to kind of pull up the whole rib cage as one thing.
And what is high frequency breathing? So what does high frequency breathing do to your body? Because I have heard that like the faster you breathe and the more you breathe, like it's actually not as good for you. And it's kind of counterintuitive in a way.
Yeah. So let's start from the mechanical point of view. Like I said, it will cause your body to use different muscles that are not as efficient as just using your diaphragm and your intercostal muscles, right? So there you're going to start to see a lot of habits forming that are not efficient because it means that your brain needs to feed oxygenated blood into muscles that help you breathe that usually wouldn't be necessary. Okay. So mechanically, that's not efficient, and it's going to cause you to run out of energy much earlier.
Okay.
And that's very important for athletes as well. For example, like when your primary breathing muscles, the diaphragm, the intercostals, are starting to fatigue, your body, of course, because it has to prioritize breathing over a lot of other things, for example, winning, because your body doesn't care about winning, it just cares about surviving, right? So your body will prioritize all of the structures that are keeping you alive, so that are keeping you breathing, right?
Yeah.
And those structures need oxygenated blood in order to function, just like all of the other muscles. But your body, your brain might then start to prioritize that. So if you're a cyclist, you don't really want your body to be sending highly oxygenated blood into your neck muscles or into your pectoral muscles, because that really doesn't do anything to help you cycle faster, right?
Yeah.
So we would like to keep the mechanics really efficient, so that it's your diaphragm, your intercostals, the muscles that are working in your breathing anyway, that those are the primary muscles that you're using, right? So that your body doesn't need to then send more highly oxygenated blood into other muscles. There will be a little bit of that in very high intensity, okay? But we don't want to start that too early. And we still would really like to keep everything here nice and flexible, also because if your rib cage can't move well, if your ribs can't move well, then of course you cannot make as much volume in your rib cage for air as you would have when your ribs are moving freely. Okay, so that's the mechanical aspect of it. Then when we go more to the physiological aspect of it, stress manifests, again, when we go from this higher breathing frequency, and how that manifests, it means that you are just exhaling a lot more CO2, right? Especially when you breathe through your mouth. You're just, because with every breath, okay, you breathe in oxygen, but you exhale CO2. And the problem is when we start to exhale too much CO2, we see really bad effects inside our body, because CO2, for example, is a vasodilator. It helps us widen our bloodways. It helps our body to transport blood with all the nutrients and the oxygen that is needed around the body. Okay, also to our brain. And when we exhale too much CO2, there's not enough CO2 in order to keep the veins and the arteries nice and open. And so you, for example, you can start to feel dizzy, or, start to get a headache and all those kind of things. So here we're already going into the physiology, diving deeper into this. Also, if this is going on for a longer time, then your body also gets used to those lower levels of CO2 in the blood. And because it's CO2 that is going to be the messenger for your body that says, hey, now you need to breathe, the less CO2 your body is used to in its system, the earlier it's always going to tell you that you need to breathe, right? This is this tolerance kind of thing that you can read a lot about now also.
Yeah. So it's really interesting that you bring that up, because anytime anything is fatiguing, right, then your brain is going to obviously send signals to battle that fatigue. And I love what you're saying, because if you are struggling to breathe, if your body is saying, okay, my diaphragm, my ribs are tired, it may not be conscious, but subconsciously your brain's saying we need to send energy that could be allocated for something else to those functions, right? And while you may be a high performing athlete, while you may be a singer, you don't want your body to be working on repairing or supplying energy to something like your diaphragm, if that's something that you could consciously control. Because then, like you said, if you're cycling and your quads and your glutes are just burning, you want your body focusing on those muscles in particular, so that you could go at that high pace for as long as possible. And I would imagine for your everyday just worker at work, maybe a doctor, maybe a surgeon, like you want to fuel your brain in a lot of ways. And if you're sending energy, if you're allocating energy to your breathing, then that's taking energy away from other functions that can help you at a high level, which I think is so, so key in this.
just be very careful, because the diaphragm will always have to be, like, it will always need that energy. So it's not about sending it to the diaphragm. The diaphragm is totally fine. It uses very little energy for a huge, huge benefit. Okay. The problem is not the primary breathing muscles like the diaphragm and the intercostals. That's fine. The problem is when we have breathing patterns that do not favor the work of the diaphragm and the intercostals, when we don't have a good coordination there, then highly oxygenated blood is allocated to other muscles who are secondary breathing muscles, right? That we wouldn't need to breathe. Okay, so because your diaphragm is always going to be the motor of your breathing. 24/7, you can't turn it off, you can't not use it. It's always going to be fueled, okay? And it has to always be fueled. But if my diaphragm has to be fueled, let's say that this is really like the minimal energy that needs to go into you for surviving, because breathing is just the most important thing for you to survive, right? But then it's more efficient to fuel the diaphragm and the intercostals than to have to fuel also the sternocleidomastoids and the pectorals and the abdominals, you know? So we don't want to add to that. But yeah, diaphragm and intercostals, you can't unfund them. Okay.
Yeah. So that's crazy, because there's a lot of small, intricate ways that you can probably tweak your breathing. So what are the 3 biggest mistakes people make when they breathe?
Yeah. First one we already talked about, they breathe too fast. Second thing, their ribs are not moving, which means that they have very limited capacity, because their ribs are not flexible enough in order to let the lungs expand. Or, of course, the opposite of expand. I forgot that English word.
Contract?
Yeah, but the lungs don't contract. They just kind of, let's say, they kind of decrease.
Steady or stable. Oh, sure.
Decrease. Yeah. Decrease. Okay, so those are 2. And then the third one, I would say that really a big problem nowadays is that people breathe through their mouth when they could really breathe through their nose. And I'm not just speaking about like high intensity. There is a moment when we all have to open our mouths. And, you know, as a singer, I can tell you, of course, when you're singing and you don't have a lot of time between phrases, of course, you're going to breathe through your mouth. But many people are breathing through their mouths when they're sitting on the sofa watching TV, or at night when they're sleeping, and that's not okay.
What does breathing through your mouth do to you that's so negative?
Well, it's actually what does not breathing through your nose do to you that's so negative.
Ooh, okay.
So, well, but yeah, because you can look at it from those two different aspects. But so when you breathe through your mouth, and it's quite a logical thing, is first of all, you're going to lose a lot more hydration. Like you're going to be, you know, first breathing in through your mouth, you're going to be like, you're going to have much more dry mouth, dry throat.
Yeah.
You know, your body will have to work much more to rehydrate all of those things. Then if you breathe through your nose, where basically A, you have much smaller holes, and B, you have turbinates. So if you look at an image of how a nose looks inside, it's not just like straight tubes, but actually the air is being kind of like centrifugated. It's kind of like twirling around. So during that time, it can be warmed up and humidified, and also, of course, cleaned. So when you breathe through your nose, your body actually cleans the air that comes in. When you breathe through your mouth, that doesn't happen as much. So when you inhale through your mouth, a lot more stuff is going to come into your body that you don't really want into your lungs. You know, bacteria, fungus, virus, like dust, allergens, like a lot of stuff that we don't want to have inside our lungs are actually being filtered by the cilia, like little hair-like structures inside our nose.
Yeah.
So that is already a huge thing, right? Then we have the whole, again, if we talk about the structure, breathing through the mouth, where is your tongue when you breathe through your mouth? It's on the bottom. It's between your lower teeth usually, isn't it? All right.
Right.
Okay. Well, that's not where it should be. It should be between your upper teeth. Because what happens, because what happens when your tongue is not resting between your upper teeth, well, you will lose space. Your jaw is actually going to retract. So it's going to narrow your jaw. And this is a huge problem with children. And you can see that. And there's a big, it's starting to become more and more evident with orthodontists that this is really a problem why children don't have enough space for their teeth. Because
so it actually changes the structure of your face.
Of course. You know, whatever habit you have is going to change the structure of your body because it's alive and it's going to start compensating. And so, of course, right? So just if your tongue isn't like a constant space keeper up on your hard palate, it's going to become narrower, and that's bad. Because also your tongue, when it's all the time on the bottom, and if you're I'm just gonna throw out some words. The constrictor muscles in your pharynx, so in your throat, right? You have some muscles in your throat that help you swallow, but those muscles also react when you're inhaling, exhaling through the nose. So they're constantly kind of like a tiny little bit stretching and releasing and stretching and releasing, and and when you breathe through your mouth, they don't do that. So they kind of become a bit lazy. And from that, then, for example, when you're lying in bed, we sometimes get snoring or we get sleep apnea because the tongue kind of falls back. The tongue is not used to being in a position where it's on the hard palate in the front. And so it's going to kind of fall back, and all of the other muscles are also a bit fluffy. And so things are going to start to vibrate much more than they should. Or they're even going to obstruct your airways, which is really not what we want, right? So nasal breathing is super important. Super important.
Yeah. So if someone's snoring, or if someone even realizes that they're mouth breathing, and it's something that they kind of become aware of, or they're listening to this and they say, is this something that I'm doing? What are some things they can do to try to maybe create a new habit to start breathing through their nose?
Well, first of all, the best thing is to just become aware of it, right? To just realize it. So if when you wake up, you have a dry mouth, or you're really thirsty in the morning, this could be a big sign for the fact that your mouth is open during the night. And so, I mean, then, I don't know, if you really want to be sure, you can place a camera maybe on your bedside table or something, just to see what's happening while you're sleeping. And then the easiest, it sounds a bit cruel, but the easiest way to get rid of this is to tape your mouth at night.
With just like a paper tape?
Yeah, I mean, I've been using old Band-Aids that my children didn't want to use anymore because they grew out of the like little flowers and bees on Band-Aids. So I'm just using those up until I have no more. But yeah, they're also, you can also find special tape that basically is not on top of your lips, but it goes kind of like around the mouth. I think it's called myotape. It goes around the mouth, and instead of kind of like closing your mouth shut like this, it allows for your mouth to open a little bit, but it kind of forces it back shut. So you have a lot of products that make things easier. But yeah, that it's basically a very inexpensive and easy way to do that. However, just as a disclaimer, right? If you're like an anxious person, or, if it's hard for you to breathe slower, which can be one of the reasons why you open your mouth and breathe through your mouth in the first place, right? Because you feel like to breathe through the nose just takes too much time, or there's too much resistance. So I wouldn't advise people to just like tape their mouth right away the whole night, because that could lead to panic attacks and like other issues. So it's maybe during the day in front of the TV, or if you're watching something on Netflix or something like that, like just try it. Just try what happens if you put a tiny little piece of tape over your mouth.
Yeah.
Or another possibility is to take a sip of water.
As she sips her water.
Yeah. But so if I, as long as the water is in my mouth, I will not open my mouth.
Yeah, so it's like forced nasal breathing then, to have something just in your mouth. And I guess it's like when you're eating, but that's not necessarily true if you're eating, right? Because you can open your mouth, and you see it all the time. It's like people talking or eating with their mouth open, it's oftentimes because they're breathing. So they're chewing, they're, and they're like
Really?
pulling air in through their mouth. I've seen it, and it's gross.
I mean,
but
I'm not sure. I mean, you can try that, but I think that's really dangerous. Like if you inhale through your mouth while you're eating, you're going to inhale food, and that's really, really not good. So that's a problem.
Yeah.
I see that if I see it with people who have pathologies like COPD, who just have such a high breath frequency and that's also very often why they lose so much weight, because they just can't get a swallow in between their breaths.
So it's just uncomfortable to eat. Yeah.
What's happening? You can eat, like you can chew with your mouth open, but your tongue in that case usually closes your airway. So you're not going to inhale, and like it doesn't mean because your mouth is open that you breathe through your mouth. You can totally breathe through your nose and have your mouth open. So I hope that people don't like really inhale through their mouths and eat at the same time, because that could be potentially deadly.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a really good thing to do.
No, I mean, you could try it, but on your own responsibility. I
would definitely not advocate for it. So the other thing, one of the things that I've been, and I was telling you before we got started that I'm currently reading the Oxygen Advantage book, and it talks a lot about, like what you're saying, the benefits of nasal breathing, but also the benefits of nasal breathing during exercise. And I'm not sure if this is something that you've done any work with, but I recently started it. And as a runner, I have messed with this before. I've played with this before. And more recently, I've been trying to do like some long runs where I don't open my mouth the entire time and try to breathe through my nose the entire time. And anecdotally, as a N of one study, right, one individual, I can say I can go so much further with the energy that I have in my tank with just nasal breathing than if I'm trying to breathe through my mouth. And it's this crazy thing, and I'm trying to understand if it's the breathing itself or if it's just that I can't run as fast. So it's kind of slowing me down, slowing my heart rate down, which is allowing me to recover. But when I'm done with my run, like I don't feel tired. I feel like I could go forever. It's like my muscles don't have, there's no lactic acid. My leg muscles aren't exhausted. I mean, is there some science behind that? Or is that something where it's just me thinking this?
There is some science behind it. I mean, right now I'm aware of 2 studies that are talking about nasal breathing in like high intensity, but we have to be just a little bit careful because those studies are very recent, because before nobody seemed to kind of notice, or nobody seemed to be interested in this whole thing. It was just like, oh, well, you inhale through your nose and you exhale through your mouth, which is also what a lot of coaches are still saying now. And I agree that there's a point where inhaling through your nose and exhaling through your mouth is like great. But usually this happens much earlier than what would be necessary. Like for you, when you say, yeah, like if I just go for a jog and it's not a high intensity run and stuff, I mean, if it feels good for you to do that and just breathe through your nose, go for it, because of all of the benefits that I counted up before, right? You're going to lose so much less hydration, which is also maybe a reason why you're feeling so much better after your run, right?
Yeah.
Because you're exhaling so much less humidity, so much less water. So there are those 2 studies. One is I think a couple of years old, and it was it was a triathlete who I think also had COPD.
Okay.
And he was doing only nasal breathing, and he was I hope I'm not mixing stuff up. But yeah, there's this one study that you can find about nasal breathing in a triathlete who had been breathing nasally for some time before that. And then last year, there's a study that came out that had 10 subjects. The problem is that right now it's very difficult to find people for a study that are in like the same kind of geographic area that have been using nasal breathing for a prolonged period of time. So because you can't just take people who have been used to run with their mouth open their whole life and then tell them, okay, and now you close your mouth, and now we're expecting to get the same results, or nasal breathing sucks.
Yeah.
It has to be, nasal breathing is something that if you're not used to it, if you haven't done it for some time, you need to train that. You need to work for it. And I understand that some athletes kind of don't see the sense in that, which I think is unfortunate because, like you said, it has a lot of anecdotal, and also in that study with 10 subjects, it has some benefits to it. But we can't say anything like specific or anything like really truly evidence-based before we don't have more research. And I hope more research will come. I'm sure more research will come, because there are many people right now in the breath world, people, like Patrick McKeon of the Oxygen Advantage, Brian McKenzie and Rob Wilson that I'm working with a lot. They are really, really looking into what nasal breathing does for you also at high intensity. So also when you do CrossFit or all of those kind of things that are like really high intensity, and what does that do when you are doing it nasal only?
Yeah. What does it do? Even without nasal, like what does that high intensity training do for you, for your breathing?
Oh, for your breathing, well, it does a lot for your physiology. I mean, if you do like high intensity intervals, meaning that you really go into your zone 5, this really helps your body to create, like if you go out of like a zone 2 into a zone 5, it's this kind of mix of having to add more mitochondria into your muscle cells so that you can basically create more energy, right? Get more capillaries to your cells in order to deliver more oxygenated blood, and in order to get more disoxygenated blood out of there. Your body will always adapt to whatever situation or training that you're doing. And so this kind of high intensity interval training will help your body to kind of get stimulated to create certain things that are then going to help your body also when you're calm, burn more fat, for example. So if we go back to like not high elite athletes, but just normal people, maybe somebody who wants to lose weight, is really, really important to move, to do something, to be active, because your body needs to be in a state where it can burn those calories that you're eating, right? Because if you're not moving, if you're just sitting on the couch, your muscles are going to atrophy. They're going to become really floppy and weak, and you don't have any power plants that are the mitochondria are the power plants in our muscles, right? That are creating energy. And the less you are using your muscles, the less you need mitochondria. And it doesn't make sense to have so many if you're not moving. So your body kind of gets rid of those. So we need to create more mitochondria, create more capillaries. And this is something that you're doing with this kind of high interval intensity training.
Yeah. So walk me through what you're doing, because you started a company, Voice Up, and you've taken your experience as an opera singer, I'll call you a breathing expert, even if you won't. But so you've taken your experience and you started this company, Voice Up. And take me through when someone comes into you, and who are the type of people that are coming in to work with you, and how are you bringing them from kind of start to finish, optimizing their health, their breathing, the whole nine?
Okay. It all very much depends on the individual case. So like I said, I started out with this method that's called breathing coordination, but I kind of figured that just one method cannot ever have the whole truth. It's just like this, right? I mean, a method is just a certain filter of the person that kind of put that method together, of which tools they use and they found useful. And that's great. It's a great start. So I try to use many different tools from different methods. So when somebody comes to me, of course, it really very much depends on what that person, what the needs of that person are. But for example, if somebody comes to me and says, look, my voice gets really tired when I speak on Zoom, it doesn't have to be a singer, but it can be somebody who just has meetings or just has to do presentations. My voice gets really tired. Then we're going to look at breathing frequency. We're going to look at, depending on if it's on site or over the internet, we're going to have a look at the mechanics. So how is the body dealing with pressure? We will maybe get to that, but that's it's something voice related. So the pressure that is happening underneath the vocal folds, what is happening with that? Is that person, for example, because of talking a lot when we breathe through our mouth when we're talking, is that person breathing through their mouth also when they're not talking because their body just got used to that pattern? Or is that person breathing through the mouth at night? If it's an athlete who comes to me, I do also do metabolic breath analysis. I just got that, so it's really, really exciting. So I have a PNOE device. So that means that I can do resting metabolic testing. So it's like a mask, and you breathe into that mask. And basically there are sensors in there that measure how much CO2 you are exhaling, how much oxygen is being used in your body. And you get a whole lot of parameters that then you can try to understand how your physiology is working, how your metabolism is working. So for example, you can understand while at rest, how many calories are you burning from fat and how many are you burning from carbohydrates? Or then if we go work with athletes, we can do an active test. So either on the treadmill or on a bike or whatever they want. It's mobile, so I can also take it to them. And so we can check, for example, the breathing capacity. We check that with spirometry, which probably you have done several times in your life. Yeah. I'm not convinced that spirometry is like the perfect test for lung capacity because it so largely depends on just strength and not so much on coordination. So, I mean, well.
So would you say it's more like strength versus deficiency, maybe? Is that how you would describe it with spirometry?
I mean, in the spirometry, you can definitely find out if you don't have enough strength in your breathing structures, right? But the spirometry doesn't tell you if, for example, your diaphragm and your intercostals are working in a nice coordination, because when you do spirometry, a lot is in your abs, right? Like you're going to push and try to exhale and you're going to squeeze your abs. So spirometry and me, I think there could be something better, but I don't know yet what this is. So let's see what the future brings. So yeah, I test people's lung capacity with spirometry, and then we see during the test how well they are using that capacity in like real life. So how much of that capacity can they use in low intensity? How much of that capacity can they use at high intensities? So is there lung volume? Can they still really use all of it when they're breathing faster? Because of course, in higher intensities, your breathing frequency is going to go up. So all of those things, and I find it super fascinating. And so yeah, I would really use different things with different people. When it comes to singers and voice users, I actually developed a little piece that looks like nothing, but we have the patent pending, so now I can actually talk about it. It's one of the first podcasts that I'm talking about this, but it's awesome. It's a piece that you insert into a balloon. Okay. And so when it's in the balloon, basically, because the balloon creates a completely closed chamber, like a pressurized chamber. So breathing into a balloon or blowing up a balloon can tell you a lot about how you're breathing and which muscles you are favoring and if there are any compensations. And with this little piece, you can put a standardized hole into the balloon and then use the balloon also as a resistance device, but a flexible resistance device. And also you can still kind of see what's happening in your lungs in the balloon because, in a pressurized chamber, the pressure is actually always the same in all parts of the chamber. So super interesting, all of this stuff.
So do you use it as that piece in that balloon? Do you use as more of a diagnostic tool for breathing or more of like an exercise usage to where you can actually increase or decrease or strengthen the muscles that are giving more pressure?
Both, but I wouldn't say this is so much about the strengthening. Okay, I mean it does strengthen to a certain point, but it's more about the coordination. It's more about really trying to find a balanced response to pressure in your rib cage and especially in your abdominals. Because, the abdominals are muscles that we we see them, right? They're right there, and they're all the
Yeah.
time. It's like, oh, you need to have nice abs and abs and abs and abs and abs. It's something that is constantly in our mind. But of course, they're not the most important muscles when it comes to breathing. So we kind of sometimes just favor those because they are so much more in our conscience and in our awareness. And so, for example, when I have people who have problems with their voice, very often they use pressure from their abdominals in order to create louder volume in their voice, which is completely unnecessary. So it's not that they don't have enough strength here. It's actually that they don't divide up that work in the entirety of their torso. So yeah, so
Okay.
I use balloons, both for
So
diagnostics and
so that's
exercise.
a great thing to get into, because I'm really curious about this. A lot of people, and I kind of, my career has taken this weird trajectory, but I've done sales for a long time, and it's been medical sales. It's in the operating room, and you have a mask on, right? And you have this mask, and you're talking to the back of a doctor, so you have to really project so that he can hear you, so that the nursing can hear. So it is a lot about efficiency and strength in voice. And at the end of the day, if it could be some stress, but it's also projecting all day long and talking to people all day long. You can be tired and not really want to work out, not want to talk to your family. So say I'm coming to you as, this expert in voice. What can I do as a salesman to help optimize my projection and my voice so that I sound like I have authority, but then also be efficient so that when I come home at the end of the day, I can still laugh and play with my kids and enjoy my evening?
Yeah, so I am a true believer that the first step for all of this is to understand how things work. Okay. It doesn't mean that we need to go into the nitty gritty of like all of the different muscles and everything, but just to have a concept how voice is produced and how acoustics work inside our body. Right? Because I believe that as long as we don't have a concept, as to what we want from our body, there's no way we're going to get that, because especially when it comes to voice, we very often, the only parameter that we have to judge is like listening to ourselves. And listening to ourselves is the worst thing we can do, because our ears are positioned in a way that before the sounds gets from our mouth to our ears, it has to kind of go to the wall and kind of pop from the wall and be reflected back into my ears, right? Very bad.
Yeah.
Because that means that the sound doesn't only depend on how I produce it, but also on the acoustics.
Right.
Right? So yeah, of course, for example, wearing a mask, it's going to kind of cut your voice in half or whatever number it is, depending on what kind of mask you're wearing, right?
Right.
And the danger is that then, because I want to hear my voice louder, I start to kind of squeeze and push and kind of be really harsh. But acoustics do not work like that. You just need to work more on your resonance. So with a person like this, I would go through the concept and all of the like what's happening and why things are happening and what should be happening in what place. And then we're just going to go basically explore together at what point in their coordination there's something that doesn't fit into that concept. Right?
Okay.
And then we can do resonance work. So we work on how the voice can build up harmonics and everything inside the pharynx and inside the mouth. So the first step is always, for me at least, is always understanding the why, the how and the why. And then we see, and then we see in what way that is compromised, and then we will work on exactly that. And maybe sometimes there are several compromised things, and we just have to prioritize. We have to maybe first start to work on mobilizing the ribs, because if the ribs are really unflexible and blocked and everything's hard here, there's no way that your body is going to deal with the pressure in any kind of flexible and coherent or efficient way. And so it doesn't make sense to kind of start to work on, the sound of your voice if the big structure down here, the motor of it, is not working correctly, right?
How do you get flexibility or mobility in your ribs? Like, what's something you can do to work on that?
Yep. So I do manual work on people when they come to see me here. And
Okay.
when I can't, yes, it's really, really working manually and creating sensory feedback, trying to help them find reference points, like just sensory references of how does that even feel when my ribs are moving? Because, the ribs are not something that we think about constantly. Like, yeah, I understand that my arm is moving and that's no problem, but my
Right.
ribs. And so the first thing is to help people understand that's how it feels when your ribs are moving. And that's what we want from your ribs. When I work online, I can guide people to do self massage of their rib cage, and like there are different awareness exercises that we can do. I would still say it's unfortunately not exactly the same like having, the
Yeah.
actual manual work with another person, but it can be very, very helpful, especially once we have done that work together, then you can go and explore that by yourself and basically create a relationship between you, like your conscience, and your breathing mechanism. And I think this is so important because we constantly try to see our body as just this kind of aesthetic thing. It has to look good, it has to be
Yes.
strong, and it has to be pretty, and there's not allowed to be any I don't know, anything wrong with it. But we tend to forget that it's basically there to keep us alive and that it's a partner for us without whom, well, nothing goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's another thing that I really try to do. I try to help people build this kind of partnership with their body. It doesn't mean that you have to like always love your body and stuff. I can still sometimes look at myself and be like, whoa, I mean, I don't like that kind of floppy stuff on my stomach, but I still have to respect my body for what it's doing and how it's trying to keep me alive every day. It's a bit like a long, 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 long marriage like mine, where, you grow old together and, there are certain things in your partner that you maybe would change if you could. But, I mean, they're like this and you still accept them and you still, respect them and love them for what they are. And I think we should do a lot more of this with our body. And I truly believe that this can happen through understanding like the effort and everything that our body does for us on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's a really great perspective to have. And I think it's important to look at it even just a little further because what you said is pretty powerful. And you said that you think of your body like a lifelong partner, like to you a husband, like to me a wife. And the really cool thing is you're like, I might not like different aspects of my body, but I love it, right?
Yeah,
Similar to your partner, where you say, I might not like that you do this, but I love you. And I think so many
exactly.
people struggle with loving themselves. And they may not love what they see in the mirror, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't love yourself, especially understanding that that's just the aesthetic of it and it's not the function. And you're so much more than the aesthetic of your body.
Yeah.
It's just a really, I love the way you kind of phrased it and the way it works within kind of that little metaphor for yourself. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
I mean, it's, and the word love maybe doesn't work for some people, like maybe it's really just like a collaboration or a partnership, where, because sometimes it can be such a pressure to have to love something, and it can
Yeah.
mean something different for people. But at the end of the day, you're in this together, and
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit also, I mean, you can even lazily see it as like, well, you can see it as a love-hate relationship or just something very functional, like understanding that if I help my body to perform its tasks more efficiently, things are going to be easier for both of us. And usually we
Yes.
kind of just expect our body to work for us, like I did when I was young. I kind of just expected that it was going to work. It was going to do it. And then when it didn't, I got really frustrated and I got really upset and I didn't understand it. But what I forgot is that I didn't nurture things. Like I always only wanted stuff from my body. I expected it to function and to work, but I didn't give it what it needed in order to be able to work efficiently. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, we are responsible for fueling our body. Like the whole thing of nutrition, hydration, all of those basically simple things. But we can't expect our body to do like a perfect job if every day we eat really unhealthy food and just drink Coke. It's not going to work, because it's going to try to keep you alive on that as well. But how is that going to look? It's not going to be efficient. It's not going to be optimal, right?
Yeah, and you can continue that metaphor of that partnership even further, right? Like if you were saying in your 20s, you were just looking at what you could get out of your body, right? Well, if you go into a marriage or a partnership and you're just looking for what you're going to get out of it, it's just not going to be this beautiful synergy that is good for both of you, right? You want to not only get something out of it, you want to give to it. And there's sacrifices that you have to make. And some of these sacrifices may be, look, it doesn't feel good to eat broccoli all the time, right?
Yeah.
But man, like I'm going to feel better because of it. So it's a sacrifice I have to make, right? Like I am now aware that I am mouth breathing. Okay. Well, it's going to be uncomfortable to tape your mouth at night for a little bit. But if you can make that sacrifice, and if you can be aware enough to understand that this is going to benefit you in the future, it's going to benefit this partnership, this mind-body synergy that you have, then yeah, you're going to have to make that sacrifice, and good, because now you are going to get more out of your body, and it's going to be a great thing all around. So man, I love that so much. What are you most excited? Go ahead.
Sorry. No, I just wanted to go back to breathing, because breathing basically is such an easy, very low-hanging fruit to basically give something to your body that it needs, like all the time. It needs all the time. And it already just taking 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, I don't know, out of your normal daily routine. And you don't even need to, like take the time and go somewhere. You can do it while you're waiting. How many times are we just waiting and we're in line and we get really in a super bad mood? Why not use that time and just say, okay, I know that I'll be waiting here for 5 minutes. Let's take that time. And for 5 minutes, I just do conscious breathing. I do 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. And you'll see that you're going to feel so good after that. And all this kind of frustration and aggression and all this, it's just going to go away. And when it's your turn, you're not going to be like, why did it take so long? And, you're not going to be like this, but you're going to be like, hi there,
Yes.
So it's so easy. It's so easy to take maybe just 1 minute. Well, 1 minute is better than nothing. You don't need to go full on, like 2 hours a day, breath work, only meditation, blah, blah. No, you're with your body all the time. And whenever you take a minute and you slow down your breathing and you close your mouth and you just breathe as slow as it's possible for you right now, your body is just going to be so happy, and it's going to be like, oh, thank you so much. And that's just going to be, it's a little gift, like somebody bringing somebody chocolates or flowers or, something. It's like a tiny little thing, but it adds up. If you do it more times, it adds up to a lot.
Yes. And I always find that, and this is kind of like that superpower of breathing in a way, right? Because what happens to a lot of people is they get stressed out and then they kind of explode. And that explosion may come in terms of violence. It may come in terms of just aggressive yelling, road rage. And those explosions can have dire implications and consequences if they're in the wrong environment, right? So I've always, one of the best strategies that I've used is, and I call it a deep breath decision. And I take a big breath in through my nose and then a really extended breath out through my mouth. And hopefully once we'll do it, but sometimes 3, 4, 5 times. And that takes like 10 to 20 seconds. It doesn't take long. But what it does is it detaches you from a situation. You've brought consciousness to your mind, to your body. And at the very least, whatever you were just about to explode on, it has not only given you like energy to your brain to focus on what you're doing, but it's also allowed you to take that 20 seconds to think about it. And you may not have that explosive reaction that you were initially going to have. Like, I hate yelling at my kids. Sometimes they deserve it, but oftentimes they don't, right? It needs to be more of a conversation. And if I can take 20 seconds so that I don't explode and yell at my kids, man, that is a powerful thing to have that's going to have implications for years, generations possibly down the road, just by adding breathing.
They learn by imitation. So, when they're really angry at somebody, they might then also just, instead of exploding and getting aggressive, they might just be like, wait a second. Okay. And this also works when you're in a situation where you're anxious, or, it's not just like the outward aggression, but also like when you're starting to feel a little bit anxious. Or the thing is, when we start to feel like I can't breathe, usually it's not true, right? Usually it's just your body going into like a stress response. Usually it's just about you taking control and saying, no, wait a second. I know that the body goes into kind of this survival kind of thing, but what if I just breathe slow anyway, and kind of convince, and there we go again with a partnership, like sometimes I need to convince my body that what it wants to do is maybe not like I can do bad things to my body, but sometimes my body also goes into like overdrive when it's not necessary. So, and I can influence that. And the better relationship, the better connection there is, the better awareness I have of like reading those signs, understanding them, the earlier I can kind of snap my body out of doing stuff that is not healthy for me. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. What's the most exciting thing with voice and breath that you're learning about, researching, have heard about recently?
I just think it's super exciting that more and more nasal research is coming out and more people are getting interested in it. And so I really think that there's, in the next 10 years, there's going to be a huge increase in awareness about how important breathing is. When I started 10 years ago, there was like nothing. It was like a desert, not much stuff happening at all. Yeah. And now everybody's talking about breathing, and it's great. It's wonderful. So that's what I'm really excited about. It's about more and more people to be able to connect with and share things with and talk to. And, we don't need to always agree on something, but it's really all about, trying to get stimulus, like new stimuli, and like, whoa, yeah, that's an interesting way of seeing this. And, and I find, of course, there are some methods that kind of claim that they're the only truth, but that's always going to happen. But I find that the breath world, at least that I know, that people are really supporting each other and really like interested in finding out more and interested in trying different things. So I love that. That I'm really excited about, because it goes against so much other stuff that's going on in the world right now, where people just feel like they're right and they're the only ones who are right, and that's it. And I feel like the breath community is a bit different, because we realize, or maybe, again, I'm not speaking for everybody, but the ones that I'm in contact with, we just realize that we don't know everything, and we're like on a journey. And it's cool. And we find tools and we find things on the way, and sometimes something is like, whoa, yeah, that works for me, but maybe it doesn't work for somebody else, and that's fine. And so I think everybody, that's also why I think it's so important to understand the concepts, the things that we know, that the kind of anatomical concepts and physiology, as far as we know, as far as we do have evidence, so that the people can then create their own way of dealing with breathing. like which exercises feel good for me. You know, some people love this kind of crazy Wim Hof stuff. But for some people, it's overwhelming, you know, and they're like, I'm not going to do that. Or other people, you know, like Oxygen Advantage and the Buteyko, you know, it's all about this minimal breathing and stuff. And when you're an elite athlete, well, sometimes you just want to take this huge breath, you know. And you just don't want to feel guilty about it. So that's also cool, you know. So everybody should just do whatever they want as long as they start to understand how it works for their body and how that impacts their partnership.
I love it. I love it. Well, I have 3 questions that I always ask at the end of every podcast, and we'll get to those. But Barbara, this has been awesome. You're obviously passionate about breathing and voice, and it comes out. And I love your story, and I love what you're doing to help people kind of bring this breath of life into themselves and optimize their health and fitness and wellness because of that. So if people want to find you, I started following you on Instagram. I love the stories you put out, the reels. How can people find you and your company Voice Up?
Yeah, so the easiest thing I think really is Instagram. It's BT_breathing coach. I do have a website, www.voiceup.si, because I'm based in Slovenia. So it's a tiny country in Central Europe. For those of you who don't know that, it's totally worth a visit because we have the Alps and the Mediterranean Sea. So I'm very, very happy to have guests at my place. So we have also a rental place that we rent out to clients who come to work with me intensively. Easiest thing is to contact me via Instagram. It's just I mean, social media is great, but I'm like an early millennial, right? So I even started to do TikTok, but that's just completely crazy. So
you'll get it. Well, all those links will be in the show notes.
No, please don't put my TikTok in there because it's only in Slovenian.
I won't put your TikTok.
And that's it's fine. Really it's not about breathing because I kind of gave up. I started like trying to teach people about breathing in Slovenian on TikTok, and people didn't care for it. So now I'm just talking about how we speak 5 languages at my house because we're a super mixed family. So my TikTok is not breathing related anymore at all.
Well, still sounds interesting, but I won't put that one in the show notes then. You're going to have to go find it, guys. So yes. Last 3 questions. I have read a bunch of books about breathing. James Nestor Breathe, The Oxygen Advantage. So this doesn't have to be breathing related, but what's the most impactful book you've ever read?
Ooh. Actually, I'm reading one right now that I think is way up there, and that is Oxygen by Nick Lane.
Ooh, I'll have to look into that.
It talks about the history of oxygen, like how the molecule and what it does, and how basically it's going to kill us all in the end because, you know, we all oxidate slowly, but we do. And we age because of oxygen, and we live because of oxygen, but we also age and die because of oxygen. And so genius, but how our body actually keeps oxygen levels in the cells super low, and how actually he arguments that it's not about how we can get as much oxygen into our body as possible, but that our body constantly fights to not have too much oxygen in there. So a completely different perspective, but super interesting. Oxygen.
I love it. I'm gonna have to check that out. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, it's really very cool. Dense, a lot of like chemistry and stuff, but written in such a great way that everybody can read it.
Wow. If you could have a drink with anyone, past or present, who would it be? What would you drink and why?
Oof. Oh, I think I would pick one of those incredible women like Marie Curie or one of those women, and I would love to discuss with them how they got to where they got to be. I mean, obviously because they were like really smart, but yeah, like women, like incredible women from history, because we're still kind of fighting this, and I would like to see if I could get some tips from them.
Oh, I would imagine they would love to get tips from you as well, because you're crushing it out there. I beg to differ. So the whole Every Breath Counts podcast mindset and mantra is about optimizing your mind, your body, your career so that you can optimize your life. And it has so many meanings to so many people, especially me. But what does it mean to you to make every breath count?
Oh, that's such a good question. I would not unlike me, I would have to think about this one. Well, I think again, try to learn, connect, share. And sometimes we can't do it with every breath. We all get caught up in everyday life and things, but to just try every day to find a couple of breaths that actually count for us. A couple of them,
I love it.
Barbara. And not feel guilty about not feeling guilty about not making every breath count, maybe. Not having this kind of bad conscience. Oh my God, today I didn't do my breathing stuff or something. You'll do it tomorrow.
Love yourself. It's a partnership and it's for the long term, right?
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. Barbara, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Thank
Guys,
you.
Go out, voice up, check her out, follow her Instagram. Enjoy the rest of your day, enjoy the rest of your week, and make every breath count.
Yes, let's do that.